I am really excited for this next talk. I had the great pleasure of working with Tim O'Reilly in the 90s on the original web, and then .com crash and bust. And then we decided to get the band back together in early 2000 and launched a conference called Web 2.0, which became an enormous meme. We then worked on Gov 2.0. Tim is really known in Silicon Valley for sort of meme making, but I think more importantly really is that he has this saying that he's helping the future unfold, and I think that he's done that with getting to know the alpha geeks and seeing where they're going, but I think directionally now I would modify it to say he's helping the future unfold in a really positive way, and I think you're going to find this talk really, really interesting. So please welcome Tim O'Reilly to the stage.
All right. Thanks, sir. Oh, you want me to use that one? All right. WTF. What does that stand for? Oh, what's the future, of course. So I want to talk a little bit about technology and the way it's changing the nature of the economy. Not really with a focus on energy, but really just thinking about some of the big trends in technology and how we should be thinking about it. So I wrote a piece last year called We've Got This Whole Unicorn Thing Wrong. It's on Medium. And I kind of took aim at the idea that's become popular in Silicon Valley, that a unicorn is a startup with a valuation of at least $1 billion. You know, there's something like 191 of them now, chronicled in TechCrunch's Crunchbase. But that seems like a pretty sorry test for a unicorn. I actually like Tom Stoppard's definition from his play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. He said, a man breaking his journey sees a unicorn cross his path and disappear. That in itself is startling, but there are precedents for mystical encounters of various kinds. But my God, says a second man, I must be dreaming. I thought I saw a unicorn. At which point a dimension is added that makes the experience as alarming as it will ever be. A third witness, you understand, adds no further dimension, but only spreads it thinner, and a fourth thinner still. And the more witnesses there are, the thinner it gets, and the more reasonable it becomes until it is as thin as reality. Now that is a unicorn, right? A unicorn is something that makes us say, what did I just see? Can you imagine, the hunters who came home and they discovered that this woman had figured out that you could domesticate fire. They were like, what the fuck? What are you doing? Right? That was an amazing unicorn. And then, of course, before long, they went, hey, this is pretty good. Let's keep up this thing. And then they took it for granted. And here are some other early unicorns, things that were amazing. The wheel, stone tools, the plow. These were world-changing innovations. So how about the book, the library? They totally changed the world. So that is my first test for a unicorn. It changes the world. They are eventually taken for granted and become as thin as reality. And this is happening today with technologies like AI. Google's VP of Engineering, John Gianandrea, said, we don't actually know what the future of our science is going to be. But once it starts working, people won't think it's impressive anymore. And that's what we want to aspire to in the world that you guys are living in, where the energy future that seems so unattainable today becomes as thin as reality, where people go, oh yeah, whatever. That will be pretty cool. So you see this transition from amazement to banality all the time. I was reminded of this recently because I was on a bus and I was looking at my phone to figure out where to get off what stop, and there was an old man sitting next to me who'd never seen this before. He was like, well, what are you doing? And I said, see that little blue dot is following us along, and when it gets to that next corner, that's showing me where I want to get off. And his eyes bugged out. And I remember now, as probably all of you do, the first time that you were using Google Maps and you were walking along and you go, oh my gosh, that little blue dot is following me. This is kind of creepy, kind of like different. And this is this magical experience that we all have that very quickly goes away. So this idea of a unicorn is something that seems unbelievable but changes the way the world works and then has enormous economic impact, far greater than was captured by the entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, is, to me, the goal of what we want to see happen with technology. So 20th century, the automobile, the airplane, the electric grid, radio, television, cell phones. These are pretty amazing unicorn technologies that are now commonplace, right? They do have a problem, though. Often unicorns become sources not just of banality, but even horror, where we do the other WTF. You know, we went from the Wright brothers to the Reaper drone, and then on the banality side to the TSA. Not so great, right? Today's unicorns: AI, self-driving cars, drones, on-demand services, augmented reality, gene engineering, commercial spaceflight, and of course, this transformation that you guys are engaged in of the electric grid to something that is much more sustainable, that is much more distributed, that will actually change the way our society works. So they're also on the path from that question at the end of WTF to that exclamation point, right? Because we already see, for example, in AI, and not really AI, but just sort of the use of algorithms and on-demand technologies, increasingly that people are working for machines. You know, that wonderful user experience that all of us have. Well, I shouldn't say all of us. How many people here have ever used Uber or Lyft? Many of you, but not all of you. Well, it's pretty amazing that you actually, your phone knows exactly where you are, knows where the driver is, you summon somebody, bang, magical experience. But before long, people started to realize that maybe it wasn't so magical for the workers, right? Because the algorithms were figuring out when they should work, whether it was, you know, how much they should get paid. And sometimes that works out pretty well, and people feel pretty good about it, but other times they don't. And the more I thought about this, the more I realized that this algorithmic management has become commonplace throughout our economy. People who work at Walmart are told when to show up for work by an algorithm. And so we're in this really interesting, challenging world where the tools by which we are going to do things like automatic load balancing of the grid are also going to lead to automatic load balancing of what humans are going to do. And perhaps they're going to figure out that the best thing for the company is to pay people as little as possible, to leave the worker as a component in a vast machine, a disposable component. And so we actually have to think about how all these technologies come together into a more sustainable economy. And so that's part of what's happening on the labor front, where you've probably heard of the hashtag, at least, Fight for 15. And it's kind of interesting because people are using internet technology to do new kinds of labor organizing. Rather than doing collective bargaining, they're actually going to the voters with initiatives. This is a powerful tool. But really, in the end, what we're trying to figure out is how to respond to the wave of automation, which is doing amazing things, which is creating amazing new capabilities for society. You know, self-driving cars and trucks are going to be much more efficient. They're potentially going to save tens of thousands of lives every year in the US alone. But they also have the potential to put a lot of people out of work. They can restructure our society for good or for ill. We have to start thinking about all those things and wrestling with the impact of these technological changes. There's an Oxford study recently in which they estimated that something like 40% of all human tasks could be automated in the next 20, 30 years. This is really big change in how we think about automation, jobs, and you have to realize that the very technologies that are going to rebalance the grid are also going to change the world of human work. And so we have to actually start thinking about the general pattern of an algorithmically dominated society and how we actually make it work for us. There's a real concern that I have in our economy that it's increasingly become financialized. And we have this notion, started really becoming the dominant gospel about 40 years ago, that if you took care of corporate profits, everything else would work. And that has turned out not so well for ordinary people in our economy. We've forgotten that if you don't pay people enough, they can't be consumers, and the economy sputters. And so there's starting to be a movement for rewriting the rules of the American economy. And I think that's one of the things we have to understand. The idea that everything must go to corporate profits is not like the law of gravity. It is, in fact, a decision that we made as a society, an experiment that has not actually worked as well as we thought it would. So I've been thinking about this in the context of machines and humans, because the choices we make will shape whether the future is a better one or a worse one. David Rolfe from the SEIU, the union, had this great line when we were talking. He said, God did not make being an auto worker a good job. It was the result of a lot of struggle and a lot of decisions that were made that created the middle-class jobs that we now look back at with great affection and longing. We've actually created the world that we're in, and we can create a better world. And I'm really spending a lot of time now as we think about sustainability. We have to think not just about the sustainability of energy, but the sustainability of society as a whole. How do we make good lives for people? How do we make a better world for all of us to inhabit? It's time to build technologies and systems as if people matter. And that's what I'm focused on. I've launched a new event called the Next Economy Summit. And I'm focused on how we use technology to augment people so they can do things that were previously impossible. We have to stop treating people as a cost, and we have to think about how we enable people to do things that are new and amazing. So I've kind of developed a vision of the next economy of how technology can be a platform for our society. How do we do things that were previously impossible? How do we make good experiences for the people who are part of delivering the service? How do we, as we automate things, what do we do with the people who have been automated out of a job? How do we actually think through what that next economy looks like? And how do we build towards a creative economy where the talents of people will be valued and put to work, and people will not just be pushed down into lower and lower income levels? And then we lead, of course, to, I think, social disruption. So the rules that I've kind of tried to derive, the first one is that everyone who's inventing the future has to think about the entire ecosystem, not just an invention. I think Henry Ford taught us this with the automobile. Now, of course, we know that the automobile had untoward consequences that we didn't understand up front. But I think in the early days, there was this vision, okay? It was like, it wasn't just the Model T, it was the assembly line. It wasn't just the assembly line, but higher wages so that workers could afford the product. It wasn't just higher wages, but weekends and the Sunday drive as a form of entertainment. We built factories, roads, bridges, motels. We restructured our society. And we are facing a massive restructuring of our society, not just a massive restructuring of our energy grid in the years ahead. So there's already some good signs of people thinking about this in the on-demand world. For example, Uber and Lyft are really deeply engaged with, hey, could we actually build better, greener, more sustainable public transportation with self-driving cars? They're already doing experiments, partnering to get elderly patients to their hospital checkups, partnering with nurses to deliver flu shots on demand. And you start saying, oh yeah, this isn't just about replacing people, it's about letting people do something that was previously impossible. So that's my second rule. Don't replace people, augment them. Imagine, for example, reinventing healthcare using AI, augmented reality, and on-demand. On-demand calls by community health workers, upskilled by AI and medical sensors. That'd be pretty awesome. Right? That is a future that we can look forward to. And when you augment people, they can do things that were previously impossible. You know, you've probably all heard about the Luddite rebellion in the early 1800s. They were smashing the looms, and yes, there was immense disruption for those weavers, and we have to be worried about that. But those weavers were not able to imagine that their grandchildren would have more clothes than the kings of Europe. They weren't able to imagine that we would put satellites in space, that we'd fly through the air, that we'd crack the atom, that we'd build skyscrapers, nearly half a mile high, that we would tunnel under the English Channel between England and France. Amazing things. So I ask ourselves, what are the amazing things that we are not doing today that we should be doing, right? We're so focused on value extraction by businesses and not enough on amazing creative things that technology will let us do. So I always tell people to work on stuff that matters. And this is why I sometimes am dismayed by Silicon Valley. Fortunately, this company is out of business. Washio, the Uber of dry cleaning. Really? That's the best you can do with on-demand? I love this one, though. It's a company called Zipline. They were like, wow, on-demand, drones. Do you know that in a country like Rwanda, like a third of women in childbirth die from hemorrhage, and we can't get them blood? And guess what? We can do it on demand with drones. That's magical. They can get drugs without the network of hospitals. They're saying this new technology lets us bypass the old system of roads and an infrastructure of hospitals because we can get this to small neighborhood clinics. That's rethinking society, leapfrogging over the past and doing it with the technology of the future. And I want to see more startups like that. And we have to remember that this is how you build a better future. There's an interesting book by my friend Louis Hyman who talks about the investments that were made after World War II, or even really leading up into World War II, what got us out of that massive slump. It wasn't just the war, it was also massive investment in the future. And there was a bold vision, and we need to get back to that bold vision of building a better future and doing whatever it takes. Because, as my friend Nick Hanauer said, technology is the solution to human problems. We won't run out of work until we run out of problems. So we have to focus on the work, not the jobs. I hear a lot of worry that the machines will take away our jobs. And I go, no, 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 no. We just have to focus on what needs doing. So, and when I think about things that need doing, I think about climate change, very, very high on the list. This, in some ways, is going to be our equivalent to World War II pulling us out of the Great Depression. We are going to have to mobilize everyone and everything to totally transform our society over the next, few decades. As finally we get people waking up, we're going to get this is crossing my fingers here, we're going to get the political will. We're going to need all of us and all the technology we have. And we're going to basically restructure our society so it's going to be completely unrecognizable. And we have to be prepared for that, and we have to build towards that. But it's not the only grand challenge we face. We have to rebuild and rethink the infrastructure by which we deliver water, power, goods, and services like healthcare. We have to deal with the demographic inversion. We're going to have more and more older people, fewer younger people working to support them. We have to deal with income inequality, or as my friend Andy McAfee said, the people will rise up before the robots do. We have to deal with displaced peoples. Climate change is going to lead to massive displacement, and we have to start thinking about how we can use technology to create infrastructure for whole new cities, factories, farms, in a different model so that people could be settlers, not refugees. This is actually an amazing opportunity to reinvent our infrastructure because we're going to be building anew for new peoples. Let's think about how those rebuilt things could become the cities of the future rather than the shanty towns that they are today. And I imagine reinventing the energy grid as a big part of that because so much of our society has been dependent upon a centralized energy grid. And we have to actually realize that today, we don't actually need to do it that way. And I think what you're demonstrating here at Verge is a great example of that. And I'm super excited that the world that you've been envisioning here and building towards is starting to go a little bit from that WTF to that, wow, it's going to happen. And then eventually is going to become just the way it is. So I look forward to that. And I just want to remind you, Eric will remember this. I used this quote many years ago in another talk I gave. One of my favorite poems is by Rainer Maria Rilke. called The Man Watching. He talks about Jacob wrestling with the angel, not because he thought he could beat the angel, but because he became stronger from the fight. And the poem ends with this magnificent invocation. What we fight with is so small, and when we win, it makes us small. This is how we grow, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. Now, you guys have been fighting, wrestling with the angel of energy transformation now for many of you for a long time. And, you know, this is probably a fight that is going to go on beyond your lifetimes, beyond all of our lifetimes. But we will get stronger from the fight. And we will actually find that we make more and more of a difference. We'll also find that as we succeed, the heroic struggles that it took to get us to success will actually be forgotten, and that will be the greatest victory. Thank you.